Greetings from Grand Canyon. I'm Ranger Grace, and I work at Desert View as Grand Canyon's Cultural Demonstration Program Coordinator. The purpose of the Cultural Demonstration Program is to give members of the 11 traditionally associated tribes a voice here at Grand Canyon by encouraging interactions with the public through demonstrations of traditional Native crafts. The program began in 2014 and continues today with the support of Grand Canyon Conservancy. This program has transformed Desert View into a place to celebrate, share, and learn about intertribal cultural heritage. Since the program began, the park has hosted more than 175 artists from the 11 traditionally associated tribes of Grand Canyon. This cultural demonstration program provides the opportunity for visitors to learn more about each tribe's culture, their history, and the skills, knowledge, and efforts involved in creating each craft. With the spread of COVID-19, we wish to keep you and our cultural demonstrators safe while continuing to share their rich cultural heritage and crafts. To that end, we've created an experience for you with the help of our cultural demonstrators. Please sit back and enjoy learning about Native crafts, the artists, and their ties to Grand Canyon.
Hello, I'm Melissa Ojeda, Marketing and Public Relations Manager for Grand Canyon Conservancy, the official nonprofit partner of Grand Canyon National Park. We work hand in hand with the Park Service to provide educational opportunities and digital programming to keep you connected to Grand Canyon. Thanks to your ongoing support, we're able to share this new series, History Behind the Arts, providing you an in-depth look at the Cultural Demonstrator Program at Grand Canyon. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce you to the Cultural Demonstrator Program Coordinator, Grace Lilly.
Hello, thank you for joining us today. We have the pleasure of talking with Duane Maktima. He's a Metalsmith jeweler joining us from his home today in Glorieta in northern New Mexico. Duane is also a cultural arts liaison and has studied prehistoric Native Southwest peoples jewelry. And thank you for joining us today, Duane. Care to start by sharing a little bit about yourself and what drew you into the arts?
Yes, I'm very pleased and honored to be part of this event. Yeah, my name, again, referring back to my name, Duane Maktima. The last name, Maktima, is my grandfather's heritage Hopi name. And I'm Hopi on my dad's side and Laguna Pueblo on my mother's side. And traditionally, the way it goes in Pueblo culture, which Hopi is part of that group, we follow our mother's clans. So although my name, is the American version of how naming is, that was my grandfather's Indian name. And being involved in historical events in his lifetime, of course, that was in the early 1900s. He was allowed, not by easy choice, but he was allowed when he was forced to go to school. They gave him English names, and he didn't want to answer to it. So that name he stuck. Was very stubborn about it and wouldn't answer to any other name. I don't know what the name they gave him was, but his last name, they allowed him after a while. The school finally allowed him to keep his Indian name as his last name. So Maktima is the pronunciation for it. Being being of Hopi heritage, it's something we follow. The one thing I forgot to mention is that our fathers, we follow our fathers, so to speak, ceremonial life. They're the ones, how would you say, to teach the young boys or young men as they grow up in this world to, how would you say, to have a mentor, an example. So growing up being Hopi, I was very lucky to have my grandfather, Maktima, was still living. So his influence had a lot of, how would you say, impact on my growing up. My grandfather was a kachina carver and, knew all the, how would you say, ceremonial folk arts or folk arts in general of, that was their ways of making a living. Not only was he, had some sort of an education through the early education system of dealing with Native American people in the Southwest, but he also was in the military. He was in the 1st Regiment National Guard of Arizona, and a musician on top of that. So he was actually a contemporary in his own time in the 1920s, the late 1919 is when he started this activity after he finished school and all that. But this is he had a lot of metaphors for using how would you say, our ancestral heritage, and like one of the things he always said was be resourceful. There's you can make a living or supplement your income by doing some of these traditional arts and crafts forms, and it doesn't cost you anything. It's all naturally there. You just have to go up and get it. Like for Kachina carvers, you can go to the Little Colorado River and get the cottonwood root to carve. And so we did a lot of that growing up, which was always a lot of fun, going along the river all day collecting wood. And we always collected a lot of wood. The wood is used for making rattles, for the handles, and then for carving for dolls. And he was very resourceful. He even, believe it or not, would keep neck bones of from after cooking a meal, a stew, and he made these little beadwork things out of them and made bolo ties from them. So I saw and became pretty much emulated my grandfather, always crafting. And when I was about 8 or 9 years old, that's when I started helping my grandfather do his major craft work, which was by then he was in the late 60s. He was retired from working for the Santa Fe Railroad, and he was pretty well off for his generation. He used to boast about his he was always expressing that he had 3 retirement benefits coming in. On my mother's side, they are as well resourceful people. They're Pueblo people of New Mexico. But in 1919, because of the Santa Fe Railroad, who came to the Laguna Pueblo Feast Day in around 1915 to recruit young married couples to work for the Santa Fe Railroad. So very interesting, how would you say, endeavor for these 78 young married couples moved to Winslow, Arizona in 1919 to work for the Santa Fe Railroad. They provided housing for them, and there was a little colony outside on the west side of Winslow, Arizona called the Laguna Indian Colony. And in slang terms, it was called the camp. And everybody in Winslow knew where the camp was. And so that was why, I guess, we're Pueblo people, so we spoke different languages, but for some reason, the songs and the dances they share are all similar. So it was pretty remarkable how these 2 communities in Winslow, Arizona overlapped, and they helped each other, which is pretty phenomenal. So a lot of intermarriages happened because of that, being in that group. They were isolated in a way, both, but it was a means of economic, economics, and to financially support a family in a new world. This was all a new world to them because they had just come out of, many issues dealing with the federal government, where, now they had to give up their old ways of life, like being hunter-gatherers and livestock and, sheep herding introduced by the Spaniards, in the 1700s. So that way of life was, it impacted the people immensely. So, because of that, there were at these 2 particular places, for instance, they had revolts and revolutions among their own people, civil war, so to speak. There was a progressive and traditional uprising in Laguna Pueblo, and the result of that was, the highlight of that was around 1860, there was a major split where the traditionals were ousted out of Old Laguna because well, actually, after the Civil War, the government came in there and started letting the people know of Laguna Pueblo that things were going to change. There was a railroad was going to run through their most sacred, um, uh, how would you say, their most sacred shrine, which was a lake that used to sit outside the village on the west side, and it was a very, very prolific spiritual center for them. That lake no longer exists because the Army Corps of Engineers after the Civil War came and blasted the dam, the natural volcanic lava flow dam of over 1 million years ago that dammed up the lake, the river, the San Jose River, and created a lake. And so that you know nobody had control. I mean, nobody knew how to deal with a new entity of people. So that is kind of another, how would you say, in vision or enlightenment that the native people had to start succumbing to another culture influencing their culture. And so, so at the time my grandparents left Old Laguna, you can imagine in those days it was just like very tight families, 3 generations living in a household, so to speak. You've heard that, we've all heard that term, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, that actually still went on prolifically in those days. But you can imagine when they took their most sacred element away of their religion, that sacred lake, that just created a chaos among their people. So in a nutshell, I remember interviewing my grandparents about this, and from Laguna, and they said, well, we had to ask permission from my parents when we went to visit the booth at the Laguna Feast Day about looking for workers to come to Winslow, Arizona for the Santa Fe Railroad. So we had to ask our parents permission, and they were already young adults, around 19 years of age, 20 years old. And I thought that was kind of, being a contemporary Indian already in growing up in the 60s, thought that was kind of like, wow, I never really realized it, but later on, as I grew older, I could understand where they were coming from. Well, they had to ask their parents for permission to leave the Laguna Pueblo land, and they prolifically gave them permission and told them things were changing in their world, and that they knew that in the future their grandchildren and great grandchildren, which I am a great grandchild of that family, that they would, how would you say, we would have to empower ourselves through another learning how would you say, how to live in a contemporary world. And that's having a better education and being able to communicate in more ways than you normally would. So Native American people today have, how would you say, the Pueblo people of the Southwest and the Indians of the Southwest, that's the scenario we deal with, and is to retain our culture, but yet through my expression of art, I can, how would you say, I think it's fascinating for people that they see that this is still a living, thriving culture. We haven't given up. We haven't tossed those old traditions aside yet. We're still continuing the legacy of our ancestors. And I think that's and the same thing happened at Hopi with my grandfather's village in 1906. There was a split there. And the village that was created as a result of that, which my grandfather was part of that group, was Hopi-Laguna, Arizona, which is on the Hopi Reservation. It's the newest village of Hopi, basically, but it's that's where my grandmother and grandfather were from, Maktima. So I got to hear a lot of that story too from him, because he was still alive and he witnessed it. He was involved in that. He was 10 years old when that happened in 1906. So he then being in the military, learning the discipline of what education can bring you. His whole outreach to our family, even my parents, my dad, my uncle, and my aunt on my Hopi side, they all went to college. And so my dad's a graduate of Northern Arizona University in business, and it didn't take much for me to realize through my grandfather's advice that education was a key to my success in the future. And but for some reason, I had this really amazing feeling for doing art. So art wasn't hard for me. I think three-dimensionally, which in jewelry metalsmithing, that's where that comes from, is the fact that I can see something and see the hidden depths of it. The three-dimensionality of what the outcome would be if it was a piece of wood, or a piece of clay, or a painting, or whatever. In art school I had to take all these kind of courses, and I did pretty well at all of them. But jewelry and metalsmithing was my passion. Uh, I think I was first introduced to jewelry because of one of my uncles did jewelry, and it was very contemporary for its time. So he went to the first beginning of the Institute of American and Indian Art in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and his teacher was Charles Lolema, which everybody in the historic art world knows who Charles Lolema was. He's from Hopeville, Arizona, where my grandfather was from. He also was a graduate of a university art program in New York, and but mainly he was in ceramics, but he did take jewelry classes, I think, and knew how to make jewelry. So that was where he made his success. He was internationally well known before he died, and left us a legacy to follow. As far as, like, there was today, Native American jewelry, contemporary, you can see all kinds of materials used in jewelry. And for being a Pueblo and a Hopi, those materials, I mean, it's basically, I'm going to show this picture here. It's an Arizona Highways magazine. I just found this the other day, and it's a picture of a headdress that a lady's getting ready to go out and dance for the butterfly dance. So you can see those prolific colors. If you look in the Grand Canyon, those colors are not, they're not, how would you say it? That's what you see in the canyon, is all those colors, the rainbow colors. So in jewelry, that's what I can borrow from. Those same elements are in the minerals and the stones we use, which we honor those, by being sacred materials uh, that we borrow from the earth to use. And that's, again, comes back to that whole metaphor that my grandfather said, that all these materials are available to you. All you have to do is go out and find it, and you can make a living from it. But always respect it and always honor it, because it comes from the earth, which is in our traditions, in our teachings, that we learn that the earth is sacred. All of its uses are for the purpose of perpetuating our lives. So that's one of the elements that I'm so grateful I got to learn and understand that. But jewelry making in the Southwest has been a tradition that goes back to in millennia, and its sources, I think, being that, believe it or not, many of our ancestral stories, or the beginnings of our migrations coming to this land of North America, they came from elsewhere. They came from, believe it or not, I think a lot of them, of course, water is a very important element of survival. So I think many of for instance, my grandfather used to always talk about his clan being a snake clan and he used to refer that at some point way, way back, they came from the Bay Area around San Francisco. That was one of their migration stories that he mentioned several times. And so they had access to shells. And so you can think back that shells were probably the most prolific beginning of jewelry that people wore. And I have an example right here. I'm going to hold this up. And this is a spiny oyster shell. And you can see it's a bivalve, and it opens here. There was an oyster inside it that's edible, which that's what you do. You go and you know how to use what's natural. You eat it, and then after this is done, you would grind the spines down, and this is what you end up with. Is a colored shell, which is either orange, goes into reds, and it goes into yellows, and as well as these abalone shells, these are Pacific particular shells that I'm holding up. This is a small abalone from, I think comes from the Gulf of California. It has a lot more color to it. So these are particular things, and I don't have any, like ancient historic examples of jewelry making, but this is what I'm talking about in the history of the Southwest. This is something that evolved out of the jewelry making process in the Southwest, honoring the shell and the symbolism that goes on, the color of the stones and the turquoise. And these are glycymerous shells from the Gulf of California. And since then, I mean, this particular type of traditional bead necklace, this goes back millennia. So the process of how this was achieved or done is phenomenal. And that was what was really empowering in an education that I had access to libraries as a who would ever thought a jeweler would just really research this. And it was a passion for me. It got to be a passion to learn the prehistory of jewelry making in the Southwest. So I found a lot of good examples in the library in either book formats of archaeological digs. The Grand Canyon in particular had some shell jewelry forms that was excavated out of ruins in the canyon, as well as prolifically all over Arizona and New Mexico. So that opens up another door. Which, how did they get these materials? It had to have been trade. So there was a connection between the people of the coastal areas as these other natives who had moved into the inlands of the Southwest, and how that community was never, that door was always open to acquire materials for trade like for jewelry making, for instance. So it just really opens up a lot of doors. I can get into more other stone materials, which I have a lot of examples of. And that's how the studying of prehistoric jewelry of the Southwest is what allowed me to start appreciating my own, how would you say, research in developing a style that's totally unique to my own. And it's based on the shell jewelry format.
Wonderful. Thanks, Duane. That was a really
Yeah.
great to be able to hear all those histories. So it sounds like you like to use a lot of those natural materials, but times have changed, and I'm sure you have a lot of different tools that you use today than your ancestors did when they were first making jewelry. Do you mind sharing some of the tools and techniques that you go through?
Oh yeah. Well, first off, we don't no longer have to, up until probably the 1930s, you'll see examples of old silverware. And in the 1930s, silver was, because of the Depression years, precious metals were not allowed by anybody to be purchased because of it was actually how would you say, it was the currency of the United States. So the federal government put how would you say, a damper on anybody could not buy and sell, acquire, buy or sell precious metals, sterling, silver or gold. But uniquely, what happened was, before that, most of the jewelry was made from coin silver anyway, which at that time was pretty much had a little bit of an alloy to it. I guess it would be a little lesser than sterling silver, which is 9.25 fine silver. And so they were making a lot of the older jewelry before 1930 was made out of coin silver. And you can imagine just pounding out these thick what do you call them, silver dollars, or Mexican silver dollars, or whatever you could get your hands on. And those are in another way, they're collectible pieces because of that era, and that's what gives it its provenance. But today, after 1930s, and this is what's really unique about the Southwest. I will share this with you because I knew this family in Gallup, New Mexico, the Woodard family. I was honored to, my first contemporary gallery I worked with was owned by Tom Woodard. And his father was the owner of one of the newspapers in Gallup, New Mexico, around, I guess, in the 30s. And it was through Mr. Woodard, who owned the newspaper in Gallup. Of course, they're affiliated with a lot of politics because they have to write about issues and for their papers. Got to know a lot of politicians, and there was a big, how would you say, awareness that the Native Americans up until that time, they were having a hard time economically because they got so used to selling their jewelry ware, and they no longer could get metal anywhere. They couldn't use coins. They were defacing U.S. currency, so they would be actually reprimanded if they were caught, buying and manipulating coins. So Mr. Woodard, with the help of political representatives of the state of New Mexico, got legislation passed to allow just Native Americans to buy and purchase precious metals. And they didn't have a source to do this. So Mr. Woodard himself created the Indian Jewelry Supply Company in Gallup, New Mexico. And so this is what we use today. Because of his benefit, we buy silver in this format now. It's already processed in sheets, and this has numbers on it because this is the gauge I use. This is a thinner gauge, and this is a thicker gauge, 20 gauge. And then from that, I'm able to manipulate this metal and make textures, but that's an embossed texture that I use. I run it through my rolling mill. And what I'm trying to emulate here is the tufa cast look. It's the sandstone casting that they do, but it's very costly and expensive, especially now. If you notice, the price of metals has gone back up. Well, I found this out in 1978 when there was a huge increase because of a manipulative scam that happened in the stock market with precious metals. Precious metals in 1978 went up to $50 an ounce. And no, everybody just quit making jewelry. I had to quit. I had to quit a year and a half because I couldn't sell the work. I couldn't, it got so out of reach, for people to afford to buy it, because you had to buy the material and then you have to price it in, factor it into the price. So from this material here, so that was what was unique about me going back to college, because I got to learn what fabricating, being a metalsmith, was about. And so some of the pieces I do today, all the pieces I do, I'm very proud of this, is I do fabrication. And this is an example of what fabrication is. This is heavy gauge, really thick sheet that I form by hand in the tooling that I have, through my education, learned what to use. And this is the tool that makes that piece. This is really odd. It's called a snake stake. And I'm able to emulate what I was challenging myself to do, was to emulate shell forms, the shells that come from the ocean. These are organic forms. Isn't that amazing how that form looks so organic, and it's very comfortable to wear? Because anything organic just seems to have a natural, just from the name of itself, seems to have a natural grace to it. And so this is how this is made. It's put into this shape in a flat sheet form, like this is the flat part. It's not formed at all yet. And then so what I have to do is I put this piece, so to speak, in this anvil, and then I use this particular hammer, which is wedge shape on both sides. These I make myself. And these forms too I can make. These are out of coil springs out of an automobile that you heat. I took blacksmithing in college, so I learned how to do this. So what you're going to do is you're going to compress this metal into this form with this nylon hammer, and then this is the end result. It's getting this shape, which is a concave. I call it a shell form bracelet. That's the name of that piece. And from that piece, you can manipulate this, and you can dissect this in half. If you were to cut this right down the middle, in the center, you would have two separate pieces, and you can invert them, and then you would have this. Two See the concave part here? That was the original form. And this is 6 solder steps to get to this part. And this has a channel inside. See this in here, which ends up, you have a channel to inlay your bracelets and the stones that go in it. And again, emulating the shell form jewelry of that whole concept of honoring a natural organic shape and form. Now the materials are different, but I'm borrowing because of my education. I was a painter as well. I prolifically did a lot of painting in college. And I could have gone that route, but for some reason, just hands-on with 3-dimensional art and jewelry just became a passion for me. Like in this bracelet, for instance, you're gonna see some grays and blues and blacks and orange and black and white, and of course turquoise. So I'm gonna hold up these stones. This is what natural turquoise looks like. This is purely natural. No enhancement done to it. This is from the Kingman turquoise mines in Kingman, Arizona. And so, this has to be cut and ground and shaped. Different colors. Turquoise comes in different shades of the original color. The oranges or the reds I use, this is Rosarita, and it's today with today's. I am aware of being a Native American that the impact on mining. This is Arizona zebra jasper. Isn't this pretty? And this comes from Prescott. There's a gentleman that I met. It's probably been over at least 30 years now. He's from Prescott, Arizona. He's a geologist by profession, and he mines by himself. It's not a big operation where this is what I'm always leery of, because I don't want to buy stuff from people that tear mountains apart. You know what I mean? I'd rather have somebody that does it discreetly and has a lot of, how would you say, perception and how would you say, spiritual regard to the environment and doesn't impact it in any way. But this is Arizona zebra jasper. It's a black and white stone, and I use this prolifically, and that's what's in this bracelet. It's a very hard stone. It's jasper. And let's see, this is black jade. I use a lot of this. This, believe it or not, comes right outside your area near Flagstaff. And this is actually a true jade. This is black, like pure black in color, like a rich lustered black. There's a piece of that, in a small slice. But you can see how black it is. But it actually, when I grind it on the lapidary machine on the wheels that I use diamond abrasives, the water turns actually dark green. So it's a true jade. And what jade is, you have to learn a little bit about geology as well. It's a chromium material. It's the basic mineral is chrome. So that's what it's a green. Chrome is green. So these are all kind of things I've had to educate myself over the years in learning about all these type of things. Those are some of the elements. I'll just hold up some other things that I've done from my bench. These are works in progress. This is actually a piece. This is one here that I'm wearing. I'm wearing this right now. But this is a smaller version, more petite. And you can see where I fabricated everything, the plate that I showed you that I embossed. And then the little arrowheads are symbolic to, this is basically, everything has a meaning to me in my work. And how this starts out a lot in my work is I draw a lot of things. I sketch. Being that I have an art background, this is probably one of 8 books that I have, sketchbooks. And I do a lot of commission work for people. So like you'll see notes on my sketches, like for the particular gentleman that I'm making this for, and what his wrist size is and what he does like or doesn't like, symbolism. And I do both, like we call it Hopi overlay or plate on plate designs. I do a lot of different types of elements like that. And this is a necklace canteen, a miniature, like a perfume bottle that I did as a project. And this actually went to the Hopi Education Endowment Fund as a donation piece. Me and Burma and Maktima made from Hopi-Laguna. And this is the original sketch, so to speak. And but yeah, everything is pretty much primarily sketched, and shapes are natural, organic shapes that I love to use. Like I like this is a star. I don't know what you call it. It's a diamond shape, but it's just one of those. This symbol comes from like some of the embroidered ceremonial wear that the men wear when they're dancing, and this is a particular like diamond shape that's in that the kilt they wear on one of the types of kilt they embroider. This is a dangle pair of earrings with rosarita, opal, and sterling silver, and that's the backs that I use. I make things that are substantial that will last for the. Basically, I want the things to last not just for the life of the owner, but to be passed on, a legacy. And that's the one benefit of what I've done over the years is the career that I've had. My work now shows up on the second generation market. I've been doing this since 1974. This is my 46th year of making jewelry as a profession. And I started out at the Museum of Northern Arizona in Flagstaff. Well, actually, I was a college student, but the professor retired and went to the Museum of Northern Arizona to start an art institute. And I was very fortunate that I had talent that I guess he saw, and he took me with him to the Museum of Northern Arizona. And I was an artist in residence there for a 3-year pilot program. And that's where I realized how important culture was, because many people came to the museum, and famous people and people who to give philanthropy, and they would call me an artist, and I was only 19 years of age, and I used to get very intimidated by that. I used to tell people, "Oh, excuse me, I'm not an artist. I'm just a craftsman," because I felt like that word was a big, it was a big word, and you have to have credentials to back that up. And I felt I didn't at the time because I was still a kid. I felt as I was still, didn't know anything about the world yet.
Thank you, Duane, for sharing so much about how your culture is expressed in your work and the processes you go through. I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about how you connect to Grand Canyon personally or even culturally, some of the ties you might have here.
Grand Canyon, it's amazing. Of course, it's one of the emergence shrines of the Hopi people. And being that I'm part Hopi, my grandfather always, related a lot of stories, especially his clan, the Snake people of Third Mesa. He often expressed that, they came from that area, but mainly more north of where present day Hopi is. But the whole canyon, I'm sure they had to familiarize themselves the uses of it. But you can imagine as well that it was a place of refuge whenever there was, I would say major catastrophes or endeavors where they had to escape somewhere, and it was a place where they went. On the other hand, on my Laguna side, the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon also has history too, because the Laguna people believed that when they left Mesa Verde, all the Puebloan people of the Southwest had at one point in their cultural time resided in the Mesa Verde country, which is not just exclusive to, how would you say, southeast of Cortez, Colorado, but there was prolifically people settled all like probably 60, 70 miles on both sides of that and all around it. And so there is a story at Laguna Pueblo, being that I went back home to my mother's village because I did have a very distinguished connection because of my grandparents. I grew up with them too, my mom's side, and I was very close to my grandmother and grandfather. They speak a totally different language, but the culture is the same. They have a lot of the similarities in dancing and ceremony, honoring the solstices, just like at Hopi. And that always had me, how would you say, wondering, the whys and the Why is it they're so separate? Why are they so far apart? And I turned out that one time at a particular solstice feast we have at Laguna Pueblo, I sing. I'm a singer there, and one of the songs we sing is the last song of the 4-day ceremony. It's the last song they sing, and it's about these two leaders that left the Mesa Verde country at way back in around maybe 1100 AD, and the song sings about how they took two different groups of people to end up in their final place where they would live the rest of their for eternity. And one group went down the Colorado River and came and made a circle, a loop, and the other group came down to the Rio Grande River and made a loop, and they both ended up at Laguna within a certain year time frame. And so that migration is very symbolic about, because there is a ruins at Hopi called Coake, and that is what the name of our Laguna village is at Laguna Pueblo in our native Keres language. It's called Coake. And there's a ruin at Hopi, and it's just southeast of Palaka, on Antelope Mesa, and there are stories of listening to the old grandfathers. When I had moved home, I was very fortunate that I got to experience that too, because the last generation of elders, after that generation, things prolifically changed. Progress, contemporary life moved in very rapidly. And so I got to hear little bits and pieces and remnants of stories and folk tales, or folk stories of our connection with Hopi. So it's pretty remarkable, that all these pueblos are all assimilated in history, and not just Laguna Pueblo, but the Rio Grande Pueblos as well. So the Grand Canyon does have that purpose. There is a significance. In fact, that village at Hopi, I think because of that, there are stories even, and they name it, that they have names for, like, the Grand Canyon. They have a name for Mormon Lake because there was a village of Keres people living there in Mormon Lake. And they talk about this war that happened there with, I don't know what, Utes or Paiute or Apache. Nah, it was way back. And one of my Indian names, for instance, is the Pacific Ocean. So their knowledge was vast. And so one of the things that the Grand Canyon leads into the ocean, eventually gets there. So that's the how would you say, the impact of a natural wonder, and then talking about cataclysmic type events that made these migrations happen. Around that same time migration, you have to factor in the fact that Sunset Crater erupted around 1100, 1200 AD. So you can imagine the natural phenomenon of the sky going dark and blocking out the sun. The sun, to the native people of the Southwest, is the supreme being, the great spirit. He's, in our languages, we call him the Sun Father, and it's the number one, how would you say, active shrine that we have, that we pray to every day, when he comes up in the morning and when he goes down at sunset. And all the Pueblo, and including Hopis, we all do that. And so everything about the sun is something. It's also called Mother and Father, not just Father, but they honor it in both. How would you say, female and male versions. So it's honored in that way. In fact, when you mention it, it's the first word that comes out is Mother, Father. And that's how you address the sun in the morning. You greet him like you would, like good morning or whatever, but in the language. And so, it's pretty amazing how, and then another metaphor that the older people used to say. I used to hear my grandfather Maktima always tell me this. He used to say, "Well, remember, you can't be lazy. You're a man, and you have to do like what the Sun Father does. He never rests during the day. When he gets up, he's always busy working. So your day should be the same. and you should always be productive and be resourceful, just like the Sun Father is. Throughout the day, that's his time of work, and at night it becomes the moon's work. The nighttime people, that kind of thing. The stars come out. You pray to the stars and the moon and the night things, as a blessing. So that would be, for instance, the element in that one piece that I was showing you this shell mosaic, and you'll see these black and white stones, and that's what that significance is, night and day. And so that's some of the metaphors that, how would you say, reminding us of using the greatest elements and resources of this land we borrow. We're actually, that's another thing that we say, our people. We never say we own anything. That's just amazing. In today's world, everybody owns things, and it's almost like, how would you say, like you're lying about it to our people. It's like, I have to really watch myself when I say I own something, because that's the metaphor that our people we don't have it in our language. We don't have anything that says we own things. We always say we borrow things. We borrow all this, the creativeness we have, the stones we use that we get from the earth. There's even little ceremonies that we do when I get acquired materials, like what I use for jewelry making, that I think that in itself will perpetuate your, how would you say, the goodness of what you do, the blessings of your gifts. And that's my wife's job. She'll put it in a basket, all the materials that we buy, like the stones, shells, if we do buy them, which is pretty much what you have to do today. It takes, financial money to actually go out and buy these materials for perpetuation of what we believe in. And so she'll put it in a basket, and we pray over it. We take it outside and pray to the sun, thank him for, how would you say, for this material we use, but also to excuse or exercise the fact that we don't know how it was acquired. If it was for just greediness, personal gain, or the amount of people that were sacrificed to get the material. Some of this material is dangerously acquired. They go in holes that they dig into the earth way back in there. A cave could collapse and cause injury to somebody. So we have to forgive that element of how these materials were acquired. And another thing that our people do is that they sprinkle ashes over it, cedar ashes, to, how would you say, to forgive that bad tangent of whatever that in Hopi it's called Wimi, or in Laguna it's called Cuite, which means that bad element or that greediness about it. You want to get rid of it. And because what I'm praying for is, I'm going to ask the Great Spirit to allow me to use this material, to borrow it, to perpetuate our family, our people, our culture. That's what I express and wish for what I do. Because believe it or not, we still live in two worlds. We still have to, there is a time when I have to go back to the Pueblo and, participate in things. And you have to, just out of generosity of your own giving, you give. It's like giving to the church, right? We have different ways of donating or giving, but, I'm always, I don't mind when, the Creator has blessed me with an immense talent and given me an awesome life, a career that I just could not otherwise have achieved, I don't think, if I didn't have this understanding of where it comes from.
Thank you. You shared a lot of amazing things about your culture and your history. And I just wanted to know, as you've kind of moved on with all this decades of experience, do you have any pivotal moments as an artist that you would like to share with the group today?
Oh yeah, I have to say, the patrons I have developed over the years, it's just pretty phenomenal. The type of people that, I don't mean to boast or put it in a context where it's just all about my achievements, but I do a lot of work for very affluent people. I do a lot of commission work for lawyers and doctors, and one of the most significant metaphors I ever heard was from a lawyer a woman lawyer, in fact. And you know how with today's issues about women's rights and the, how would you say, women in the workplace, um, you know, this one particular patron just shared this with me, and I thought it was so, and I had never heard it this way, but she ordered some pieces from me, and she's been a big avid collector of my work. Every year she would order something, so she had pretty good substantial collection. But she would, one year she told me, she goes, Duane, oh, this is just perfect, this is just what I need added to add to my collection. She goes, Duane, you know what I do, you know I'm a lawyer, and I work with a lot of men in this business, and I have to go to these really intense meetings sometimes. And she said, one of the things that when I know I have these meetings where these very powerful men are going to be in these meetings, the night before I get my wardrobe together and I get my jewelry out and your stuff comes out. She goes, because the next day I'm putting your work on, because it has that, I don't know, how would you say, it has that, I call it, she says, I call it power jewelry. She goes, it's like I become Wonder Woman. She said, it just empowers me to give me that strength. And you know, when she said that, it just really dawned on me that, you know, that's not how well. First of all, it in its own right, it's just an honor and a flattering way to hear it. But on the other hand, the way I thought about it was all that spirituality that I encompassed from the learning and on the experiences I've had with my people, the culture. That's what that is. That's the power of the connection of my ancestry. And that at that point told me, you did it. You did it. This is what you were trying to get to achieve in your line of your creative spirit. And this is what it means. This is what it's about. And so it made me rethink and honor myself again about just to keep that up and to perpetuate that, to always think of that, because from then on it just became more and more pretty much an everyday, every patron account, where this is what basically they all believe in, is when they put on their, and you know how a woman is when she goes out that door, you know, there's a mirror in the hallway, and jewelry are talismans to people, and specifically people with, how would you say, a very eclectic life, and you know, maybe it's eccentric life, I don't know, but you know, they go out that door, there's always a mirror in the hallway, and what do they do before they leave the door? They have to take one last look at themselves. And if those earrings or that pendant they're wearing or that necklace isn't the one as they leave that door that they're comfortable with, what do the women do? They go run back up to their bedroom and change that look, and they get that piece that's going to make whoever they're going to plan to be with that day, it's a statement about who they really are. So that's, I'm very honored that I have achieved that in my career. I don't how would you say, I that's pretty much a guiding spirit in my creativeness, is not to be how would you say, not to be a sellout, not to be a plagiarist. You know, I stick with what I know. I stick with who I am, and I try to honor the ancestors of my people by what I do. And I think myself, I'm happy. I'm very happy in my heart, because I know my family's around me, my ancestors are around me, and you know, that's one thing I know for sure, is that if your wife still loves you at this, being married to a wife 42 years, that you know, we still laugh, and my kids still love me, and I love them, you know, deeply. And that's the thing that makes the most out of all this, is that when they're happy, then I guess I did something right, and I'm very grateful for that.
Do you have any words of wisdom that you would like to share with other artists that you've learned in your experience?
Well, you just follow your dream. You know, there's, and I don't mean to be skeptical. I don't think that way, but a lot of times art can be very, very hard, you know, to make a living as an artist. I was a teacher as well in my career. I was a I was a teacher in jewelry metalsmithing at the Institute of American Indian Art. I had my own consulting business work helping tribes in Pueblo tribes in New Mexico for vocational training. And the thing that I learned the best was that I would tell my students, don't give up your day job yet. You know, because a lot of them thought they would learn how to be an artist, and then just for the fact that art, you can make a living at art, that they would just give up everything else. And then, like, what happens, you never know what's going to happen. Like, I think I've been through some of the worst recessions, and well, I think some of the most prolific things that I experienced was Desert Storm 1990, and then 9/11. Oh my goodness. You know, those are things you totally don't expect, and the economy suffer from that. And art is one of those type of things that is how would you say, it's a luxury type of item that people buy when things are right, the economies are great. You know, people don't mind buying things for themselves to wear, or art to hang on their walls, or you know, that kind of, or nice clothing at, you know. So I'm very but I had good mentorship. My professors in college were artists as well as being professors, and I think one of the most prolific advices I ever got was this one professor, jewelry professor I had, Jake Brookins. He's been gone now for about 20 years. He was the one that took me to the museum in Northern Arizona. But one time he mentioned this. He says, Duane, says, you got a lot of talent. He says, you're going to go far in this world. And he said, being a jeweler, he goes, I tell you, the reason I'm saying that is because throughout history, way back in history, even when there was kings and queens, whenever there was a major disaster, or where they had to run away or close up the towns that they were ruling in, they always had these secret places they would run. And you knew who they always took with them? I say, who? He goes, they always took their jewelers. And you know what? That is so amazing that I'm living the life today because of the patrons I've developed in the 46-year career that I've had developed it. Take the time and really appreciate the patronage that you get as an artist, because those people will come back to you over and over and over again. Even in this pandemic, I'm amazed how busy I am, because I have these just most outrageous patrons that just, you know, they can afford to do things like this. You know, there are people, and there will always be people. That's the philanthropy of America. That's the philanthropy that supports the National Park Service. Those are the kind of people that support me. You know, that I'm just so honored to be in that light. But the two other things is always be willing to share. Always be willing to go above and beyond the call of duty. You know, like being a teacher, I shared what I knew for many years. I was a board member of many nonprofits. You know, because of my passion, not only as an artist but for culture. I've worked with a lot of cultural things, museums, art shows. You know, some smaller things like maybe tribal committees, or you know, on arts and crafts, trying to develop stuff there. And artists in residence. Oh, I've been artist in residence at the Ameren Museum for the last 3 years. In the winter, I stayed there 3 months. What an awesome place to go for the winter in the high desert of Arizona, southern Arizona, and interact with people that just you know, it's a winter time, how would you say, getaway. Southern Arizona, a lot of people come from way up north, Canada, Minnesota, New York, Washington State, and I got to meet a lot of patrons and support there. And but it's all because what I've shared today, it's basically I'm sharing the same light about the history of my people, knowing that I never knew that was going to be something that would be something that people would be very curious about, because I think in general most people are pretty ignorant. about, not in a negative way, but just the fact that you can't learn everything overnight or through a lifetime. And that's a metaphor that I realize now more than ever. I'm getting I'm getting up there in age now, and but I just feel like I've accomplished so much in my lifetime, and I don't take anything for granted. That's another metaphor I always use. Appreciate everything. I think with what I shared today about the natural stones, the natural materials I use, and the grateful thankfulness that I, how would you say, honor these materials because they come from a source that is irreplaceable sometimes. It's getting more and more of that. We're putting more and more of that impact on the earth today than ever. And we need to really honor that and make people aware of it. And handcrafting done by these digits. My grandfather used to say, the Creator gave us all these things to allow us to live in this world. Eyes, a brain, hands, digits to work with your fingers, your feet, your legs to carry you around. And what better way to honor the Great Spirit than to do everything by hand? That's what my metaphor is. Try to keep, today's technology, it's a very technical world. We're going into this computer everything, but you know, I'm a dinosaur. I will be a dinosaur till I'm gone, and I will fight for handcrafted everything because my ancestors did it, and so can I. If you have more questions or concerns, I'm available. Thank you very much again.
I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge, your experience, and your skills with us today. And it's an honor having you a part of our cultural demonstration program. And we appreciate your efforts in helping more people feel connected to Grand Canyon, its history, and its spirit. So thank you so much, Duane.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. And have a great day, blessed day. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you, Duane and Grace. And to learn more about Duane and his jewelry, visit Pueblo5decodesign.com. And don't worry, we'll share all those links in the comments for you to go back and follow up with it. And Grand Canyon's Cultural Demonstrators Program is made possible with support and grants from Grand Canyon Conservancy and Art Place America. To learn more about artisans in this program, go to grandcanyon.org/demonstrators. Again, that's grandcanyon.org/demonstrators. Stay tuned for more History Behind the Arts features on both Grand Canyon National Park and Grand Canyon Conservancy's social media pages. Thank you for watching.